During the 2 years of COVID-19 pandemic, many families have not been able to see their loved ones when they were sick or after they died. As a result, some families buried the wrong people and some traditions had to fall away because of these restrictions. Joining us to discuss the impact of cultural practices is Nokuzola Mndende from the Icamagu Heritage Institute. Thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it. I found this to be such a concerning story because I remember when the COVID-19 pandemic hit and government implemented its restrictions, some people were even unable to identify their loved ones' bodies and to say this is the right person that we are going to bury. And they were even unable to attend the funeral. Tell us how sad and devastating this was, especially for certain traditions.
Thank you, Heidi. It was very, very frustrating. In fact, many families are still hurt even now because they are not sure whether they buried their own people or some stranger. Because what the government did, for whatever reason, this COVID-19 came or was interpreted, the major problem was that there are some traditions that were undermined. And secondly, it was also class-based. That was our problem, because you would find that with the low-class people, they were not even allowed to identify the bodies. They were not even allowed to bring them inside the homestead. They were not even allowed to come next to the coffin to talk to the deceased. But what happened now with the upper class of this very same group, you'll find that they were allowed to go in the halls, they were allowed to view their bodies, the coffins were allowed to come there. So that is why with us, we were not sure whether this is another approach to destroy African tradition and African spirituality. Because you must understand, from an African perspective, death doesn't mean destruction of life. It means a transition from this world to the spiritual world. And therefore, this must be respected, because the flesh, yes, the flesh can decay, but the bones symbolically represent the life. And again, it represents the immortal soul. That is why when we talk to ancestors, we metaphorically call them the bones, the white bones, and so on and so on. So it is important to bury the deceased in a respectful manner, because there will be rituals to accompany this deceased person, to mourn the deceased person, to bring the deceased person, because we believe that spiritually the person is with us. That is why with most families, you would find that they have to do other rituals to appease, because the deceased are saying, where are we? We are not at home. Bring us home. That means they buried the wrong body. So these are the problems that we encountered.
Definitely, and I find what you're saying so important, because I even remember that in the beginning, I'm not even sure now, it's actually going to be important for us to figure that out, but I know that when somebody had died from COVID-19, you couldn't even go near the mortuary, because many families and many rituals call for one to wash the body of the deceased and interact, and as you said, talk to the deceased and have these traditions played out. But not even that was allowed. You couldn't even wash the body or take the deceased home to perform those rituals. I know in our culture, normally the body might stay over the night at the homestead, and that was not even allowed.
Yes, it not only ended there, Heidi. When a person dies far away from home, that person, we must bring the body to the main heart. And even when we take the body, we must talk to the body that, Nokuzola, you died in Cape Town because of this and that. Now we are taking you home. They were not even allowed to do that. you know, they were just buried like animals. And it is, Heidi, so disappointing that it is our own leadership who are in the forefront of this destruction, because you'll find in the municipalities, those councillors would say, no, and the health, and those people working for health, no, don't come. And you find them as outsiders dictating on the families on how to bury and even where to bury the deceased. And you had looked, even with the police, they would come and destabilize. And when we bury an individual, we need peace. But there was no peace caused by the government officials coming from outside, knowing very well what the tradition is. That is why I'm saying many wounds are still septic even now because of our own people. And it was worse, Heidi, if I can repeat it, when those who are big politicians and those people who are medical doctors who died of COVID, nothing was done to them. They were buried in a very decent manner and their families were invited. So is this COVID meant to destabilize the African tradition as the other traditions have done previously? So that was the problem that we had. We couldn't even come closer to the deceased. The outsiders came closer to the deceased. So we are still having those septic wounds.
Definitely, and I think what else was very disturbing, and I remember, I think we even covered it here on the channel, was that in the beginning, when there was so much unknown with regards to COVID-19 and government was not sure whether a deceased could still be carrying the virus and spread the virus, people were buried in plastic bags. They were put in plastic bags and then put into the coffin. And you had families saying, that cannot be, because you're going against our traditions, and we are being told by the deceased, there's a calling and a message to say that they are suffocating because they are in a plastic bag and they are being buried in a way that's never been done before.
And it's worse with these plastics. Who was suffocating our own deceased? A person is in a coffin, is covered with a plastic that is tripled. That was very disturbing, because that is not allowed. We are not even allowed to bury a person having sharp objects. So we don't know what was there. And what was worse, we were not even allowed to identify this person. That is why there were people from other provinces buried in another provinces. And now we had to take another long way for those bones to be, those people to be exhumed and be buried home. So really, it is our own government that made those disturbances, because should they have treated us equally, we wouldn't be having such hateful feelings and anger, because there's still anger even now.
Yes, certainly. I want to quickly speak to you about what this means for future rituals and traditions that are practiced, especially when you mentioned something quite significant in one of your answers, where you said just because death happens does not mean it's destruction, and there's still conversations and interactions with deceased and callings and engagements that do happen. When somebody was buried and traditions did not happen, or the wrong person was buried in the wrong province and the family thinks it's their loved ones that are in a particular space, what does this mean for future callings or engagements with deceased? I'm sure this is quite worrying for you.
It is quite worrying. That is why there will be a time where the families should gather together, because there is what we call the power of speech. So they must go perform rituals of appeasing to say that it was not of our own. It's just because we were let down by our government to treat you like dead animals. So we appease that you reveal yourselves to us, and so on and so on. So that means there will be new rituals performed, because we become worried when there's no communication between the deceased and the living. And sometimes they appear to us being angry. Sometimes they say that I am not happy where I am. So you must find me and take me home.
Just one last question. Have things changed now? Are you able to perform rituals and traditions when a deceased passes away of COVID-19, or do the same rules still apply?
You see, partly others have been eliminated, but there is still a problem, because you'll find that if a person dies and a reverend to those people who are Christian comes, it will be the reverend who will tell you that, will tell the family that, okay, I'm giving you 1 hour to do this. And why is this man dictating in another family? Because he says this is because of COVID-19, so you must do this 1, 2, 3, and 4. Otherwise, for instance, in my uncle's funeral, I couldn't go because I was told that the reverend said by 8 o'clock you must, I must be finished and everything should be finished here. So the reverends are still dictating according to COVID-19 regulations.
I think it's so worrying and very stressing. But thank you so much for your insights. I think it's such an important conversation. And we often forget how important these traditions are and how important they are in also finding closure and being able to engage with the afterlife. So we really thank you so much for giving us insights there, Nokuzola Mndende, from the Icamagu Heritage Site.